Hello, you are listening to the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. Your host, Erica Sacosio, invites you to join her community of passionate and inspiring leaders in the ECE field, where she discusses, reflects, and shares the best ways to invest in our children, families, teachers, and community. Because after all, we know they are the heartbeat of any successful program.
Erica Sacosio here with the Child Care Director's Chair podcast. I am so excited to have you on today. I know so many of you are stressed out, we're burnt out, we think that we can do all the things, and for the most time we do, but we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. So in today's episode, Unmasking Superwomen, we're going to talk about the heart of early childhood education with a very special guest who's mastered the art of stepping away from being a superhero and embracing a more fulfilling and balanced life. If you're a teacher or a caregiver who feels overwhelmed by endless demands in your role, this episode is for you. I would like to introduce to the mic, she probably doesn't need a lot of introduction, but Jen Rafferty. You may have seen her on TEDx. She owns her own speaking company. You might have seen her, maybe her books. So she is very accomplished. I am very happy to have her on our show. I told her before we came on, when I grow up, I want to be like Jen. So Jen, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, your career, and how did you end up on this particular topic?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I will say, too, this particular audience is near and dear to my heart. My mother was a nursery school teacher for most of my life growing up, and I have very fond memories of her coming home with arts projects that I needed to help her cut and being scolded if I didn't do it correctly, and she was going to do it herself. And so, making sure that the teachers and the directors who take care of our youngest population are honored and supported and held and taken care of is extremely important to me and in the company of Empowered Educator, because you are quite literally setting the foundation for our next generation, and you are overlooked and you are underappreciated and not given the respect that you so deserve. And I am fully here to help change that narrative. And it starts right now, today, because we need to step up and into our feelings of empowerment with this, to remember who you are and the important job that you do every day. So that's a little side there. So thank you, Erica, and everybody who's listening for the work that you do in this world.
Thank you. So share with the audience a little bit about your personal journey from how you went from feeling like you had to be a superhero to finding more balance in career and life.
Well, being a superhero was just part of the gig. I was a teacher for most of my career. I was a music teacher, taught from pre-K all the way to adulthood. But in the classroom, I taught mostly middle school. And we were told often that teachers are superheroes. And on the surface, that sounds great. Who doesn't want to be a superhero? But in the small print, what we don't realize until we're fully in it, and we don't even recognize it, is that it comes with a very expensive price. Because when we compare ourselves to these immortal and indestructible superheroes, we forget that we are very much human. Like I said in my TEDx talk, Superman never takes a day off for himself. He's not like, hey guys, I know the world's on fire, but I need to take some me time for today. That doesn't happen. And so when we compare ourselves to these superheroes, we get lost in the narrative, and it is a dangerous path to burnout. And so reclaiming the narrative of, yeah, you're a hero. Yes, you have the most important job in the world, and you are very much human who needs to take care of themselves in order to show up and serve in the way that you want to and have the impact that you meant to have in this world. That's why you signed up for this gig. So for me, a lot of things kind of changed at the same time for me during the pandemic. I was going through a divorce at the same time that the pandemic hit. I moved out of my house with my two kids who were 5 and 7 at the time. That same weekend, the world shut down in March of 2020. And I could no longer, teach the way that I was teaching. I was like I said, a music teacher, and singing itself was very dangerous at the time. If you remember, we just didn't know how this thing, happened and who was getting sick and why. And so everything that I thought I was the day before, I all of a sudden wasn't. And I had to come to this reckoning of who was I and who did I want to be and bridge the gap. And saying goodbye to that superhero narrative was a big part of that journey for me, which led me into the path of learning more about emotional intelligence, mindset, and continuing down the research that I'd already been doing about cognitive neuroscience, started my PhD in educational psychology. And, a few months later in, spring, I suppose, of 2021, Empowered Educator was born. And now I support educators on that same journey so they can remember their power and step into it as human beings.
So I think so many people can really relate to your story, especially teachers, because I think, when everything shut down, a lot of people had to rethink what it looked like. And then as you said, as scary as it was, I think people became much more reflective of, geez, hate to sound like doom and gloom, but if the world ended tomorrow, like would I be happy to continue to do what I'm doing? And for a lot of us, the answer was no. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the pivotal moments or realizations that help you understand that you don't have to do it all, that you can still be successful and be happy?
That's a great question. I became very involved, like I said, in the mindset work. We all get Brene Brown. We all got our Glennon Doyles. We get the Tony Robbins, and we do all the things. But having the knowledge, listening to the podcast, it's not enough. You actually have to walk the walk. Mm-hmm. And being embodied in these practices feels profoundly uncomfortable. Because if you are living your life for decades thinking that you have to keep it all together, and the second you feel like you're dropping the ball, your whole world's going to fall apart, the one moment that you're going to walk in the other direction of peace and ease and letting go of that narrative, your nervous system is going to completely sabotage the whole endeavor, because your brain, its only job is to keep you alive. That's it. Your brain does not care if you're happy. Your brain doesn't care if you're learning things. Your brain doesn't care if you're living your dreams. In fact, it would rather you didn't, because it has no evidence of you doing that and surviving. It really just needs to keep you alive. And if you've been living a life with stress and overwhelm and frustration, that's safe and normal, even though it doesn't feel good. And so getting out of that is challenging. So for me, the pivotal things that happened was being in a community of women in this particular case who were also doing the same work of embodied practice of what it means to understand your body, recognize that your nervous system has a language that's speaking to you. When you have a headache, instead of ignoring it, take a moment and ask, what is this headache telling me right now? Am I hungry? Do I need to have some sleep? Do I need to go to the bathroom? I think it's so interesting, especially as early childhood educators and directors, because most of our kids up until a point are nonverbal. They can't really express themselves. We're always wondering, well, you're upset. Clearly something's wrong. Let's figure it out. But when it comes to us, when we have chest pain, when we have a stomach ache, when we have our neck cramp, what do?
Not take an aspirin. We're taking aspirin.
Right. We're fine. All right. And then an aspirin, Erica, is mild, right? Because sometimes we self-medicate with other ways, which no judgment, just an observation, right? And so for me, embodiment of this work and really diving into understanding my brain and how my brain works, what it means to feel stress and how I can navigate out of that, and continuing to practice it. I still practice this work all the time. And that has led me down a very different path of success, which used to be very external. And now success for me is being able to feel the way I want to feel for as many hours a day as possible. Mm-hmm. That's my definition of success now.
I like that. For the folks who are listening, I think we all have identified the problem and we all live with the problem mostly daily. Can talk to us a little bit about how do you start? How do you start setting the boundaries? How do you start saying, this is what I'm going to do, like Superman taking the day off? How do people start?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was just at a new teacher orientation yesterday, and we had this conversation. It's like, okay, this sounds amazing, Jen, but like, how do I even do this? Mm-hmm. And you start small. And what I always recommend is for anybody who's listening, like wants to start this stuff right now, 4 breathing breaks throughout your day. Put your hand to your heart so you remind yourself you even have a body. and do 3 rounds of a box breath, which is inhale for 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. Do that 3 times and do it 4 times a day. Do it in your car before you get out of your parking lot, in the parking lot before you get out of your car in the morning, 1 time during lunch. And if you're telling me that you work during your lunch, well, then do it in the bathroom. 1 more time in the parking lot before you leave, and 1 more time after dinner before you go to bed. And what's going to happen is you're going to remind yourself that you have a body, remind your nervous system that it's safe to feel safe, remind your nervous system, your body, that it's safe to be slow. And you're going to start to raise your awareness to start making new choices, because you can't change something you don't notice. And we're so on autopilot all the time that if we don't stop that and make a new choice, nothing will ever change for you. So is breathing going to change the world? Absolutely not. That's ridiculous. But what it is going to do is going to give you that conscious awareness so you can start making new choices so that you can change other things. So start there.
Yeah, that's great advice. I actually started doing that, and my listeners, like, they tune in on a regular basis. I started breathing after I went on a trip, and I remember my daughter saying to me, "Mom, are you okay?" And I went, "Why? You just stopped and started breathing." I learned that practice, and that was in January, where it was quite a few months ago, but I do find it very helpful. So I think that is a great place to start. Maybe they do yoga. Maybe they're already a little bit mindful, but they're still feeling like, what other things can I do? Do you have another recommendation for maybe somebody who isn't just starting, but maybe isn't quite there yet either?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't see your thoughts, but you can hear the words that are coming out of your mouth. And we underestimate every single word that leaves our lips. And our language is so incredibly powerful because it directs and reflects where you're placing your attention. And where your attention goes, energy flows. That's how this works. And so if you're sitting here thinking to yourself, I'm so stressed. You know, last time someone called you, like, how are you doing? Like, I'm so stressed. I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so busy. Well, then you are affirming all of that. And that's not to say that we bypass how we're feeling, but there are moments in your day. If you slow down, if you gave yourself permission to move, speak 10% slower, what would you notice? How much more intentional would you be with your language? And how would you describe your day or how you're doing to someone who says, "How are you?" Because everything that you say, you are affirming. So you want more time for yourself, and all you can think of is how you never have time for yourself. Well, that's all you're going to get. You want some peace and ease, but all you're talking about all the time is how overwhelmed you are. That is all you're going to get, because that's actually how your brain works. You are sending a message from your lips right to your brain that I want more of this. And that's some of the work that we get to do in Empowered Educator, is really learn about how your brain works. We were never taught or told this. We just kind of grew up existing and feeling like we have to operate kind of similarly to the way our parents did or other models that we had in our life. And they did not have this information when they were growing up. So now that we do, we get a chance to operate differently, and paying attention to your language is one of the best things that you can do.
That's great advice. Can you share some self-care practices or routines that have helped you maintain your well-being while still being passionate about your work? So, it's maybe finding a little bit of that balance, because you can go the other way too. And so how do you balance the work and the home and personal?
Yeah. So, a couple things. First of all, like I said, I practice everything that I teach. And those breathing breaks are still something that I do as part of my practice. There is this idea that we have to choose one or the other. But one of the most fundamental principles of Empowered Educator is the most generous thing that you can do for the people in your life is take care of yourself. The more you dive into your own personal growth and development, the more impact you make. The more you're able to show up with a loving, compassionate heart. Because when you are showing up tired and exhausted and burnt out, you are impatient, not snappy. You don't have the time or the space to deal with anything, let alone a child that needs you and or a parent that needs your guidance and patience and compassion. And so while it's easy to kind of think of this as or, I really am going to offer you, for those of you who are listening, and is that when you start to pay more attention to you, everything around you changes. It is not selfish. It is the most generous thing that you can do. I will tell you, even yesterday, my kids went to school today was the first day of school. Yesterday, they needed last minute things. And so I ended up going to the store, even though I said I wouldn't go to the store last minute. And here I was in the parking lot, and I felt my body activated. My nervous system was jacked up. You know that feeling, right? Where you're having trouble breathing and your shoulders are up to your ears and your stomach is clenched. And I had a moment, just like you had said earlier, Erica, that hand to heart. I said, I just need to take a moment and breathe. And because my kids have been watching me in this work, they knew what was going on. And what's so great about it is that if in an effort to get them to the store, if I were to just zhuzhed that down and gone to the store, I would not have shown up as my best self. And so not only am I giving them a gift of my best self for them, being a better mom for them, I'm showing them how to do this themselves by being a model. It's not do as I say, not as I do. It's watch me. Our kids don't listen to us. We know this. We're in education. And that is the most generous thing that you can do. If you want to have a healthy work-life blend, start there. You need to start, even though it's going to feel so uncomfortable because you've never done it before, because everyone around you's never done it before, because the messages that you've been getting is work harder, more, hustle, more. And the second you just dial it back, that 10%, to make it safe and just see what happens, everything's going to start to change for you because you've created more space for so much more.
I would love for you to talk a little bit about how educators can find more joy and fulfillment in their roles. I mean, I think we see it on social media all the time, especially on TikTok. I can't do it anymore. But there are some that really love what they want to stay in the field, but maybe struggling with finding joy. So how can you get back to that place where you're focused more on the joy than the things that are not going right?
I have the same answer for you, Erica. It is, you get an opportunity to look within, because I think that's part of the problem. We are looking outside of ourselves for things like joy. I can only be happy when I had a good day, where I can only be happy as a daycare provider or as a daycare director or as a preschool director. Mm-hmm. For example, I'm just going to use attrition rates, for example, right? I mean, it is a revolving door. I was just working with Head Start out in Santa Barbara, and there's another Head Start program that I work with on the East Coast too. And attrition is always an issue, right? And so if you are thinking to yourself, I can only be happy when I have a high retention rate, you have no control over who stays and goes. Yeah. And what you're doing is you're handing over your joy and you're handing over your happiness to other people. I can only feel happy if I had no parents angry at me for something today. That is not in your control. And so how can you ever feel joy if you constantly abdicate that away? And so what gets to happen is joy, happiness, excitement, inspiration gets to be an inside job. I'll be happy when it's when I'm happy, because then you show up to those parents differently. And then when you're looking at retention and attrition, you're looking at it through a whole new lens, because you are happy and joyful and unshakable. And it is not dependent on someone else's choices. And that takes practice. Mm-hmm. And going back to what I said at the beginning, baby steps, not with breathing, because we can't find that inner joy if we're stressed out all day.
Thank you. That's great insight. Let's talk about, for me, this part is something I connect with, how the role of community can support you when you're feeling like you're really looking. But when you're trying to get some type of a support, I feel like community plays a big part in that too. Yes, of course, looking inwards, but also looking at the folks around you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, for sure. The journey, and I'm so glad you said that, the journey is inside of community, because we are communal beings. Human beings are meant to live in community, and community is the medicine. Community is the medicine. And what you get to do as program directors is foster a community for people. And it is also important that you find your own community outside of that space who are supportive, who are celebrating you, who lend an ear when you need to release, who listen without judgment, who ask you things like, what do you need right now? What can I do to support you? You know, that community, and I'm speaking not only from my own experience with my own community of women who are like sisters to me, you know, this is the community that we have created within Empowered Educator, where people all over the world who are coming together, who are doing this work individually in collective, is so powerful because a high tide raises all ships. Yeah. You know, this community of raising each other up, especially as women, and I know this is a very female dominated field, you know, this is the type of world that I want to live in. I am not available for women tearing each other down because your success is a reflection of some sort of failure that I feel on the inside, and I'm going to throw it back at your face. What we're doing here, we are creating a world where everyone knows their wholeness, where their self-worth is never up for negotiation. And so when you win, I win, and I am cheering you on, and I know that you're cheering me on too. And that is so powerful, particularly as adults who are working with kids, so they see that too.
Yeah, find them for sure. I think that's, you know, so important. Definitely has gotten me through times when I'm like, and I, you know, get on the phone, and they don't even have to be people you see every day. There are certain friends that, you know, you might not have seen in 20 years and 10 years, and you can get on the phone and pick right up. So let's talk a little bit about how, or the importance of pursuing personal passions or interests outside of your work role. Because for me, you know, my family's like, oh, you always work. And I'm like, podcasting is not work. It is work. It is super fun. Sometimes I'm like, this is my therapy, you know, but finding things that you enjoy doing outside of work and maybe even outside of your family, things that for yourself. Talk about that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to take your business to the top? Join Dr. Lyman Montgomery on Sail to the Top, the podcast that dives into the real issues business owners and HR pros face every day. From compliance headaches to team challenges, Dr. Montgomery reveals the secrets to scaling with success. Don't just survive, thrive. Listen to Sail to the Top wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah, I think as teachers particularly, and if you're a teacher and you're also a mom, your identity can become completely overwhelmed by those two things or by one of those things. And so I want to be clear here. We're coming at this from a place of non-judgmental observation, right? Because this is how we make conscious choices and conscious changes. And so if you are only one thing, it feels very conflicting then to want to make decisions that might go in the opposite direction of that one thing, which is why sometimes work-life blend feels so hard, because it's like, well, who am I? Am I a teacher or am I a mom? And if I need to work, well, then that's taking away from being a mom. If I need to go over here with my family, then I need to. And first of all, none of those two examples have anything to do with you alone as a person. Not because you by yourself. I am is a full sentence. Not, you don't need to have anything else after that. You are, period. Everything else after that is sprinkles, right? That's the bonus stuff. And when we realize that we are not our roles, there's so much fluidity that happens because you're not attached to anything. And you can pursue other things because that's part of who you get to be in this lifetime. And it's so exciting. And I will tell you, for me in my own journey, that was very difficult. And it didn't happen until everything was burned to the ground. I, got through a divorce and went through COVID at the same time. I was not teaching anymore the way I used to be. And when I started my PhD that fall, my professor just asked a question like, introduce yourself to the rest of the class. And everyone was introducing themselves in relation to their job, their relation to their spouse, or relation to their children. And while I loved being a mom, I didn't want to lead with that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't know who I am anymore. And it was this moment of like, well, who was I? And who did I want to be? And so I had a beautiful opportunity for self-discovery to find out, well, who is just Jen? Who is Jen? And it was really scary and super fun. And now I can tell you who I am. I'm a woman who is committed to her impact. I'm a woman who trusts herself completely. I'm a woman who values relationships and friendships and family. I'm a woman who loves to travel. I am a woman who understands the value of sharpening my axe, which means, like getting the stuff that fills me up, right? And if you notice, for me, the way I identify now has nothing to do with anything external. This is all about these internal things about me that I love. Of course, coming into different contexts, I can put on different hats, right? At the beginning of this podcast, you asked me to introduce myself, and I told you about my role as an educator and an author and the founder of this incredible company, Empowered Educator. But that's not who I am. That's what I do. And that is very different.
Maybe that's why kids are so happy, because when you meet kids, it's pretty much like, hi, I'm Johnny and I like the color. Like, it's not, the son of David and Susie. So maybe that's why kids are so happy, because they just have that, I'm a little kid. Life is great.
So much we can learn from that.
Yeah.
And, to take that a step further, how often then do we say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what value does that question really have for a 5-year-old?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. Can we just let them be? Let's let ourselves be, please.
So, Jen, unfortunately, we can't all quit our jobs and start amazing companies, although I'm very lucky to have my own company. What would you say are some ways to create a work environment that supports both the well-being of educators and the growth of the children that they care for? So let's talk about the actual work environment.
So that is, to be clear, never my goal. We need people to be in the classroom. We need people to be, like when I share my story, it's not like, all right, everyone leave their job. We need people in there. But what's so great about, being in this role for me is that I get to support the people who are in the classroom.
Yeah.
And it's such a different way than I could have ever done in the classroom myself. And so we need you to be there. We need you to be happy, because happy teachers make happy kids.
Yeah.
And as the directors of these programs, you are the head domino. If they're watching us, so are your employees. So when you say things like, take care of yourself, and then 3 months later, you are having a meeting with them because you want to talk to them about how many sick days they've taken in the last 3 months, there's a disconnect there. If you're saying, enjoy your weekend, but you're the one sending out an email on Sunday night, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
If you're saying your well-being is important to me, but you haven't eaten lunch and you haven't gone to the bathroom all day, there's a disconnect there. And so, yes, I work with educators, but when I work with school leaders, when I work with directors like you, and for those people who are listening, that's where the juicy stuff really happens. Because when you walk the walk, when you're the one putting up boundaries, when someone's knocking on your door and you're like, hey, do you have a second? And you're eating your lunch and you say, yeah, sure, even though you really just wanted to sit there for 10 minutes to eat your lunch, you are not honoring your boundaries, which means that that person recognizes that and takes that information back with them and doesn't honor her boundaries. But when you say, actually, I don't, is it an emergency? And that person says, no, it's not an emergency. You say, great, give me 10 minutes and I'll circle back and I'll hear what you have to say. And you are able to create that boundary. You are walking the walk.
Yeah.
That is how you create an environment that fosters well-being. You do your breathing breaks. You be that example. You be the most regulated person in the room, because it doesn't matter what you say. It matters who you be.
Jen, is there anything that you want to share with the listeners that I haven't really asked you yet?
I like to share just one thing that sticks with me. I keep this on my desk and I think it's really important to share. So often we just like keep going and going and going because we feel like it's just never enough. And I really want to bring this home that enough is a decision. It is not an amount. And you are the only person that gets to decide whether or not it's enough. And it's so easy to just like continue to look at this laundry list of things that you have to do every day. Well, guess what? It's going to be there tomorrow.
It's
okay. It's enough. It can be enough. And you get to decide.
That's amazing. That's going to end up a reel. I'm going to tell you right now, Jen. Can you tell folks a little bit about your company and where they can find out more information? And also your book. We didn't talk about that too. So share all that now.
Yeah. So the book is, I wrote when I was teaching. So that's for music teachers, actually. If you're interested, it's called A Place in the Staff, Finding Your Way as a Music Teacher. There's another book coming out shortly, but that's not out yet. So I'm gonna wait for some information. So stay tuned about the next book. My company, Empowered Educator, serves school communities. So we serve teachers, we serve school leaders, we serve office staff, paraprofessionals, and parents. Because from where we're standing, when the adults in these children's lives understand their self-worth, they understand how to regulate, they have the tools to continue to show up as their best selves, we are setting them up for success. Because if we want our kids to know their self-worth, we need to know ours, period. And we get to do that in a whole lot of different ways. We go in and we do workshops, we do keynotes, we have self-paced classes that are online, virtual things. We're just starting this really cool self-regulation series, pop-up events all over the country right now where teachers come in and learn these self-regulation skills with other educators, creating that community that we crave so much. And it's a lot of fun. We have a good time. Healing doesn't have to be heavy. And we experience so much joy together because there's so much joy out there that's available, but you can't access it if you are consistently feeling overwhelmed and stress. So we give educators the tools to navigate this themselves so they can feel empowered.
Where do people find you?
Easiest place is at my website, empowerededucator.com. And on Instagram, it's Jen Rafferty. And on Facebook, we hang out at Empowered Educator Faculty Room. And those are great places to be. And if you are on the website, empowerededucator.com, you go to the resources page. There's a ton of free resources on there for you. You can play around and find the things that resonate with you.
Thank you so much, Jen. You have a podcast too, but you can find all the things on her website. But she also has a podcast, so you can hop on over and listen to that as well. You want to tell them the name of your podcast?
Yeah, the name of the podcast is Take Notes with Jen Rafferty.
Nice. Okay. So thank you for always tuning in day after day. I love you guys so much. Your support means the world. I hope that this episode was helpful for you. I care about you. And I want you to be happy and healthy. So with that, I'm going to say, have a great day. And remember, it's the small details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business.
Well, all the cute little kiddos have been picked up and it's time to go home. And that'll do it for another episode of the Child Care Director's Chair. Please leave a review so Erica knows the information is helping you to manage and improve your childcare centers. Remember to subscribe to get the latest episode from Erica's Child Care Director's Chair.